Chapter 1. The First Quiet Signs. The ocean always looked the same from the balcony of the Santiago Coastal Observatory. Dr. Elias Rourke leaned on the railing, hands folded loosely, watching the moonlight ripple across the surface in a wide silver path. The air was still warm from the day's sun, though the breeze carried a faint bite from the Antarctic currents far to the south. Somewhere below, the gentle machinery of the wave turbines hummed, a steady, familiar sound he'd known for nearly a decade. It was quiet here, too quiet for what the world's headlines have been shouting lately. Elias had read the messages, the cautious advisories from the United Nations Space Defense Council. Strange signals in the outer system, unexplained voids and long-range survey grids. But to most people, these were curiosities, the kind of scientific mysteries that filled late-night documentaries but never touched real life. He had always believed the same, until tonight. He heard the knock behind him, 3 slow taps. He didn't turn. "You're out late, Commander," he said softly. Commander Yara Vance stepped onto the balcony, her boots soundless on the composite decking. "And you're watching the waves again." Her voice carried no judgment, only the same calm steadiness she'd had when she first visited the observatory 6 months ago. "Elias, we've picked up something new." He exhaled slowly. "Another signal?" She shook her head. "No signal. No noise at all. Our Mars array just went blind." Elias turned now, studying her face. Yara's composure was famous in defense circles. The woman had commanded fleet destroyers during the Belt Rebellion and never once lost her calm. But tonight, beneath the even tone, he heard the faint strain. "You mean the whole array?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Every dish. Simultaneously. No static, no interference, just empty." Elias frowned. "That's not possible without deliberate masking," Yara finished. She stepped closer, lowering her voice though the nearest staff quarters were 3 decks away. "The only entities we know with that kind of masking capability are human, and we're all here on Earth." Elias leaned back against the railing, looking out over the black horizon. "You think it's them?" Yara didn't answer directly. "The Council's formal position is that we don't know. But unofficially, yes. I think it's them." Chapter 2. Echoes in the Sky. 2 hours later, Elias sat in the main control room, a half-empty mug of cold coffee beside him. The wall-sized display showed Earth's orbital defense grid, a quiet constellation of satellites and listening posts stretching out into the darkness. Every few seconds, faint green icons blinked to indicate a system status update. Except for the Mars sector. That corner was now an empty field of black. "They've never been this close before," Yara murmured from the seat beside him. Elias kept his eyes on the display. "We've never been certain they exist at all." "Oh, they exist," she said. "My first tour in the belt, we lost 3 mining stations in 6 days. No debris, no distress calls. Just nothing. The company blamed pirates. But the ships that went missing weren't the kind pirates target. Too slow, too poor." And she paused, as if debating whether to finish the thought. "And the radiation readings on the one station we found, they were unlike anything in our database." Elias rubbed his temple. He'd always been a man of measurable facts, the kind you could log and repeat. But in the past few years, too many of those facts had begun to fray. Yara tapped the display, zooming in on the far edge of the moon shadow. "We think they're here," she said quietly. The region lit up with a faint outline, an object nearly 20 kilometers long, drifting just inside the shadow. No signature, no reflection. Its presence was inferred only from the way background starlight vanished behind it. "God," Elias whispered. Yara leaned back. "We call it the curtain. It's been moving toward us for 6 days. At this pace, it will be in low orbit in less than 2 weeks." Chapter 3. The Ocean's Calm. The following days passed in a strange, almost dreamlike routine. By day, Elias worked as he always had, reviewing tidal energy data, cross-referencing atmospheric chemistry samples, answering the constant trickle of research queries from universities around the world. But every evening, the ocean felt different. The gulls were gone. The breeze carried an edge of stillness that didn't belong to summer. And far above, he knew something was coming closer. Yara visited often, sometimes alone, sometimes with her quiet-eyed lieutenant, Rafik. They never discussed the curtain in public areas, but the unspoken tension followed them like a shadow. One evening, as they watched the sun sink into the horizon, Yara said, "The council's meeting tomorrow. They'll vote on whether to broadcast a global alert." "You sound like you already know the outcome," Elias said. "They'll vote against it. They always do. No one wants to spark panic before we're certain." "And when will we be certain?" Yara didn't answer. Chapter 4, First Sight. It was a week later, during the soft pre-dawn hours, that Elias first saw them. He had risen early, restless. The observatory's upper deck was deserted. The sky above the Pacific was still deep indigo, with only a thin blade of gold on the horizon. And then, without warning, a ripple of silver light moved across the stars. Not a meteor. The motion was too smooth, too deliberate. A second ripple followed, then a third. He felt his breath catch as the largest shadow he had ever seen drifted into view, blotting out a whole section of the night sky. There was no outline, no edges, only a shifting absence, as though reality itself had been folded away. The curtain. It moved with impossible grace, passing directly overhead without a whisper of sound. For a moment, Elias thought he could hear something, not with his ears, but deep in the base of his skull, a faint harmonic vibration. It was like standing near a massive cathedral bell just before it rings. And then, as silently as it had arrived, it was gone beyond the southern horizon. Chapter 5, The Decision. By the time Yara found him, Dawn had painted the ocean in silver and rose. "You saw it," she said simply. "Yes. And now you understand why we can't wait." Elias nodded slowly. He felt no panic, only a strange calm. "What do you need me to do?" Yara placed a small, matte black case on the railing between them. "This contains a communication key. It will link your observatory's transmitter directly to the fleet network. When they move, you'll be our southern relay. We need you to send everything you see, every reading you take. No didas." Elias rested his hand on the case. "And if they reach the surface?" Yara's eyes met his, steady and unreadable. "Then we'll have to hope humanity remembers how to survive." Far out to sea, a single dark line appeared on the horizon, the kind of optical illusion that made sailors squint and shade their eyes. But Elias knew it was no trick of the light. The curtain had returned, and this time it wasn't drifting past. Chapter 6, The Shadow at Noon. By midday, the sky over the southern Pacific had dimmed unnaturally. The sun still burned high, but a gray veil muted its warmth. From the balcony, Elias could see a line of fishing vessels heading back toward the coast, their white wakes foaming in uneven trails. He could feel the shift in the air, heavier, as though it carried more weight than oxygen should. The curtain hung over the horizon like a wall of absence. Even during the day, its shape was visible, a darker shadow against the blue, swallowing the light around it. The way it moved was wrong. It didn't roll with the clouds or drift like a storm front. It slid, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. Inside the observatory, the staff had begun to whisper. Some avoided the windows entirely. Others stood frozen, staring as if trying to convince themselves it was only a mirage. Elias kept working, not because the work distracted him, but because it was the only thing that kept him grounded. Chapter 7, The Key. Commander Yara returned in the afternoon, her uniform crisp despite the salt air. She carried herself like a woman used to moving through storms without bending to the wind. Rafik trailed a step behind her, eyes scanning every corner of the room as though danger could be hiding in plain sight. "Elias," Yara said quietly, "it's time to install the key." They moved to the transmitter room, a narrow chamber filled with racks of blinking consoles and the low hum of cooling fans. The matte black case she'd given him last week sat unopened on the desk. Elias picked it up, felt its surprising weight. "Once I connect this, they'll know we're watching," he said. "They already know," Yara replied. Inside, the key was a small crystalline device no larger than his thumb. It pulsed faintly with an inner light, a shifting blue that almost seemed to respond to the rhythm of his heartbeat. He slotted it into the main console. The screen flared once, then a new set of encrypted channels bloomed into view. On the largest monitor, a map appeared. Not just Earth, but the orbital layers above it, peppered with hundreds of green dots representing the defense fleet. And far beyond the dotted line of lunar orbit, a vast black wedge marked the curtain's exact position and projected trajectory. "They're still holding position," Yara said, "but we've detected micropropulsion bursts along the curtain's leading edge. That means they're preparing to move," Elias finished. Chapter 8, The First Voice. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The observatory's top deck felt colder than usual, the air thinner. He stood beneath the stars, watching the curtain's silhouette creep higher into the sky. Then, without warning, a new sound touched his mind. It wasn't like hearing through ears. It was more like a low vibration resonating in his thoughts, just at the edge of understanding. He froze, hands tightening on the railing. The vibration shifted, forming something closer to a tone. And then, impossibly, a voice emerged. Not in words, but in a pattern of feeling, curiosity, distance, and almost clinical detachment. He staggered back, breath sharp. "No." The sensation faded instantly, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the mechanical hum of the wave turbines below. When Yara found him minutes later, he didn't speak of it. Not yet. Chapter 9, The Meeting in the Dark. At 3 o'clock, the Defense Fleet sent an encrypted summons. Council Directive, Commander's Assembly. Elias was allowed to listen in as the Southern Relay. On the main screen, a mosaic of stern faces filled the grid. Admirals, scientists, heads of state. The conversation was calm, almost too calm, as they debated the curtain's intentions. Some argued for an immediate strike. Others warned that aggression could doom any chance of peace. Elias barely heard them. His mind kept returning to that strange voice. It hadn't felt hostile, but it hadn't felt human either. When the assembly ended, Yara lingered by the console. "You were quiet," she said. Elias hesitated. "What would you say if I told you they've spoken to me?" Her expression didn't change, but he saw the shift in her eyes. "In words? No. In impressions. Like they're studying me. Or us." Yara considered this, then nodded once. "Then they know we're listening, too." Chapter 10, Signals in the Deep. The following day, the observatory's hydroacoustic sensors, normally used to track whale migrations, began recording low-frequency patterns from deep beneath the curtain's projected path. Elias analyzed the data with growing unease. The patterns weren't natural. They repeated in precise intervals, like pulses. "It's not coming from the ocean floor," he told Yara. "It's coming from something in the water." Yara's brow furrowed. "Landingkraft. Not in the traditional sense. The energy signature is cleaner. Too clean." That evening, the fishing vessels did not leave port. The coastal air grew heavy with unspoken fear. Even the gulls had vanished entirely now, as though the coastline itself were holding its breath. Chapter 11, The Quiet Descent. 2 nights later, the curtain moved. Not quickly, not in a way that would have been obvious to anyone glancing at the sky. But on the defense maps, its massive form began a slow, deliberate glide toward lower orbit. From the balcony, Elias could see its edges catch the faintest shimmer of reflected sunlight, like the outline of an enormous, invisible manta ray moving through black water. The vibration returned to his mind. Stronger now. Not words, but intent. Observe. Measure. Elias gripped the railing hard enough that the cold metal bit into his palms. "Why me?" he whispered. No answer came. Chapter 12, The Message. That same night, the Keys console lit up with an incoming transmission request. Not from the defense fleet. From them. The waveform was unlike any human modulation, a spectrum of tones shifting faster than the ear could follow. The translation AI scrambled to parse it, producing only fragmented phrases. "We see the light. We measure the edge. We are not alone." Yara stared at the screen. "This is first contact," she said. Elias felt the words like a weight in his chest. "No." This is reconnaissance. And somewhere beyond the black horizon, the curtain's leading edge glowed faintly, as if hundreds of unseen eyes had just opened. Chapter 13. The Day the Sky Changed. It began at dawn. The sun rose over the Pacific in its usual slow climb, gold light spilling across the horizon. For a moment, the world looked untouched, serene, the kind of morning Elias used to savor with coffee and silence. Then, without sound, 3 long shadows rippled across the clouds. He stepped onto the balcony. The curtain was no longer a distant wall in the sky. It hung directly above the Southern Ocean, its edges reaching far beyond the limits of sight. The air was different now, heavier, the blue of the sky muted, as if seen through smoked glass. And from its underside, 3 shapes detached and began to fall. They didn't tumble or burn like meteors. They descended in perfect control, gliding on invisible currents. Each one was vast, easily the size of city block, their surfaces shifting and rippling like liquid metal. Behind him, alarms began to sound in the observatory. Chapter 14. The First Landing. By the time the first object reached the ocean's surface, the coastal waters had gone dead calm. Not a single wave broke. The craft touched down without a splash, sinking halfway below the surface, leaving only a smooth, gleaming arc visible above the waterline. The hydroacoustic feeds lit up instantly. Elias leaned over the console, eyes scanning the readings. "They're emitting something," he murmured. "Not sonar, not heat, something else." Yara stood beside him, watching the map. "Fleet commands ordering all civilian vessels to port. They're setting a perimeter," but she didn't finish. Elias knew why. Against something this large, a perimeter was a line drawn in sand. Chapter 15. The Second Voice. That night, Elias couldn't resist. He returned to the top deck, the black ocean stretching endlessly beneath the stars. Far to the south, faint points of light marked the fleet's patrol ships. And beyond them, the first alien craft gleamed faintly under the moon, like a half-submerged eye. The voice came again. "We measure the edge." The impression carried images into his mind. Not literal pictures, but sensations. The chill of deep water, the texture of rock, the slow pulse of a heart not his own. "Why are you here?" Elias whispered. "To know the light." He felt himself shiver. "And if you don't like what you find?" No answer. The presence faded like a tide, pulling away. Chapter 16. The Council's Line. The next day brought a council order. No contact without fleet authorization. Any signals received must be routed through command channels only. Yara delivered the message in person, standing in the transmitter room with her hands clasped behind her back. "They're afraid of you," she said. Elias looked up from the console. "Me? You've already made contact, voluntary or not. That makes you unpredictable. They spoke to me, Yara, directly. I didn't go looking for it." She hesitated. "That may not matter." Chapter 17. Beneath the Surface. 2 days later, the second alien craft submerged completely. The hydroacoustic readings spiked as it moved toward the continental shelf, sliding along the seabed with inhuman precision. Elias tracked it in silence. The patterns it emitted were changing, becoming more complex, almost musical. That night, the dreams began. He saw corridors of black glass, lit from beneath by shifting blue light. He felt the slow gravity of deep ocean pulling him down. And somewhere, far below, something vast and patient waited. When he woke, the sensation of water still clung to his skin. Chapter 18. The Ultimatum. On the 5th day of landfall, the fleet broadcast an open message to the curtain. It was short, formal, and carried across every known channel. "Identify yourselves. State your purpose. Failure to respond will be taken as hostile intent." The response came in less than a minute. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't language. It was a wave, a deep, resonant pulse that rolled through the atmosphere, rattling windows and shaking the bones of every person along the coast. In the control room, Elias gripped the console. "That wasn't a refusal," he said softly. "It was a warning." Chapter 19. the fleet moves. The first skirmish happened just before midnight. A patrol destroyer, the Horizon's Wake, reported detecting a smaller alien object breaking from the main craft. Orders came to intercept, but when the destroyer closed to within a kilometer, the object vanished from sensors, only to reappear directly behind it. What happened next was visible from shore. A column of light, pure and white, lanced upward into the sky. No sound followed, just the silent fall of burning fragments into the sea. The Horizon's Wake was gone. Chapter 20, The Choice. Yara found Elias alone on the balcony after the skirmish. The night was still, but the air carried the faint smell of ozone. "They're not going to stop," she said quietly. "The Council's voting for a full-scale response." Elias looked out over the water, where the alien craft still floated like a patient predator. "If they wanted us dead, they could have done it already. That's one interpretation." He turned to her. "And here's another. Maybe they're waiting to see if we'll attack first." Yara studied him for a long moment. "You think you can talk to them?" "I think they're already listening." Chapter 21, The Whispering Sea. The coast was quiet, almost unnaturally so. By now, most of the civilian population had evacuated inland, leaving the small fishing town around the observatory a shell of its former self. Street lamps still glowed at night, but there were no footsteps, no laughter from the harbor pubs, no gulls overhead. Elias stood at the balcony rail, looking out over the black expanse of ocean. The alien craft still rested there, silent and unmoving, a gleaming arc beneath the moonlight. Somewhere far above, the curtain itself loomed invisible against the stars. And in the stillness, Elias began to hear it again. Not the alien's mind voice this time, but something lower, almost like the hum of the sea itself. It was rhythmic, deliberate, too steady to be natural. The sound seemed to vibrate through the rail into his bones. It made the hairs on his arms lift. "Come below." Chapter 22, Breaking Orders. By morning, Elias had made his decision. The Council's latest communique made it clear. The fleet would launch a preemptive strike in 72 hours if no peaceful resolution was reached. The alien craft would be targeted first, then the curtain itself. He couldn't let it happen, not without trying to make direct contact. When Yara arrived for the daily systems check, Elias was already at the transmitter console, bypassing the fleet's encryption lockouts with a crystalline key she had given him weeks before. "You're crossing a line," she said, not moving to stop him. "Maybe," Elias replied. "But if this turns into a war, we might cross a line we can't ever come back from." Her jaw tightened. "And what if they decide your message is a threat? Then they'll ignore me. But I have to try." Chapter 23, Into the Blue. The alien response didn't come over the radio, or through the key, or on any human frequency. It came in the form of a light. Far out at sea, the half-submerged arc of the alien craft began to glow from beneath, a slow pulse of deep blue radiance that shimmered across the waves. The glow grew stronger, then narrowed into a single beam, stretching toward the observatory like a bridge made of light. Elias stood frozen at the balcony, his skin tingling. He could feel the invitation. When Yara's hand caught his arm, he turned to see the conflict in her eyes. "If you go," she said, "you may not come back." Elias glanced at the beam. "If I don't, we might not survive." Chapter 24, The Descent. They took a small, unmanned research skimmer, one of the fast electric craft used for oceanic sensor work. The ride was silent except for the low hiss of water against the hull. As they neared the alien beam, the sea became unnaturally still. The blue light shimmered through the water, its source deep below the surface. The beam was not warm, not cold. It simply was a constant presence that made Elias feel like he was standing inside a thought. Then the water opened. It didn't boil, didn't churn. It simply parted, lowering the skimmer as if some invisible hand guided it downward into a vast chamber of liquid light. Chapter 25, The Chamber. The alien vessel's interior was unlike anything Elias had imagined. There were no sharp edges, no visible machinery. Everything was smooth, flowing, walls that curved like the inside of shell, lit by veins of shifting luminescence. The floor seemed to ripple gently underfoot, as if the entire craft were alive. Shapes moved in the periphery, too fast and indistinct to fully register. They were not humanoid, more like elongated silhouettes, their forms constantly shifting, folding into and out of the light. One of them approached. The voice, the presence, filled his mind instantly. "We measure the light bearers." Elias swallowed hard. "We're not here to fight. We measure all things." Chapter 26, The Exchange. He felt the alien sift through his thoughts. Not memories, exactly, but impressions. Images of Earth's cities, forests, deserts. The hum of human voices. The heat of sunlight. The ache of loss. And in return, they offered him glimpses of their own existence. Vast oceans beneath alien stars. Cities built inside the shells of living creatures. A sky that shimmered with the slow pulse of a dying sun. Elias staggered under the weight of it. They were explorers, archivists, but not peaceful in the human sense. Their purpose was preservation through dominance, a catalog of all they encountered, kept in ways not always voluntary. "You can't take us," Elias said aloud. "We're not specimens. You're the last light." Chapter 27, The Warning. The alien's presence withdrew slightly, like a tide pulling back before a storm. "Others will come. Many. We take the measure so the darkness will know you exist." Elias struggled to understand. "You're not the threat. We are a shadow. The dark behind us is greater." For the first time, Elias felt not curiosity from them, but urgency, a faint thread of something almost like fear. The light around him dimmed, then flared again. He realized it was a signal. They were sending him back. Chapter 28, Return to the Surface. When a skimmer broke through the ocean's surface again, the world seemed brighter, louder. Yara was gripping the controls, her knuckles pale. "What happened down there?" she demanded. Elias looked back at the smooth arc of the alien craft, now silent again under the morning sun. "They're not here to kill us," he said slowly. "They're here to warn us." "Warn us about what?" He didn't answer. The words "others will come" were still echoing in his skull. And far above, the curtain shifted, not closer to Earth, but turning as if facing some distant point beyond the edge of the solar system. Chapter 29, The 72nd Hour. The countdown had begun. Fleet Command strike order would execute at midnight, less than a day away. Across the coast, the remaining civilians had been moved inland, replaced by patrols of armored vehicles and shore-based artillery. From the observatory balcony, Elias watched the preparations in silence. The alien craft still rested offshore, unresponsive to every hail. To the fleet, that silence was proof of hostility. But to Elias, it felt like waiting. "They're not moving," Yara said from behind him. "Not preparing shields, not launching weapons." "That's not what they're waiting for," Elias murmured. Chapter 30, The Second Sky. It began in the early afternoon, a faint glimmer above the curtain, barely visible against the pale blue of the upper atmosphere. At first, the fleet dismissed it as a sensor artifact, but within an hour, the shimmer expanded, resolving into shapes. Multiple shapes. Unlike the sleek arcs of the first arrivals, these new objects were jagged, irregular, black against the sunlight. They moved fast, cutting across the curtain's edge like shards of glass sliding into place. And the moment they appeared, the alien craft below stirred for the first time in days. Chapter 31, The Signal. The blue beam returned, but this time it did not invite Elias aboard. Instead, it split into three, each one lancing outward toward the horizon. The ocean lit up for kilometers around as the pulses moved in precise, geometric patterns. Elias recognized them instantly. "It's a broadcast," he said. "To who?" Yara asked. He glanced at the jagged silhouettes above the curtain. "Not us." Seconds later, the voice returned, not in his mind alone, but through every unencrypted channel in range. "The dark comes. Bear your light." Chapter 32, The First Strike. The black shapes breached the curtain in silence. There was no fire, no flare. just the sudden tearing of the sky as they slid through, their surfaces swallowing sunlight. The nearest fleet cruiser fired immediately, a triple burst of kinetic rounds. None reached the target. The space around the black craft bent, and the projectiles simply vanished. And the black shapes answered. A line of pure absence cut through the cruiser's hull, and half the ship ceased to exist. The other half tumbled burning into the sea. Chapter 33, Alliance in Shadow. The arc-shaped alien vessel moved, gliding toward the nearest black intruder. It did not fire weapons in the human sense. Instead, the water around it boiled upward, coiling into spirals of light that struck the black shape directly. For the first time, the intruder staggered. "They're fighting them," Yara said, almost in disbelief. Elias didn't answer. He was watching the arc vessel's light patterns, recognizing fragments of the signals they had shown him before. It wasn't just combat, it was communication. Chapter 34, The Last Transmission. That night, the jagged black craft multiplied, their numbers doubling as more poured through the curtain. The fleet fought alongside the alien arcs, a reluctant and wordless alliance forged in necessity. But the enemy was relentless. On the observatory console, a new signal appeared, a narrowband pulse directed solely at Elias's encryption key. His hand shook as he accepted it. "The light will not hold here. When the dark comes for your home, run toward the edge. We will find you." And then silence. Chapter 35, The Curtain Breaks. Near dawn, the curtain itself shuddered, ripples of energy radiating across its vast surface. The jagged craft moved as one, converging on a single point high above the ocean. Then the curtain split. For a heartbeat, Elias thought he saw another sky beyond, stars unfamiliar, brighter, and far more numerous than Earth's night. Then the gap widened, and the black fleet began to pour through in numbers too great to count. The arcs, Earth's first visitors, surged upward to meet them. Chapter 36, The Choice. The fleet's admiral came over the open channel, voice strained. "All forces withdraw to fallback coordinates. We can't hold this position." Yara turned to Elias. "We have to go." Elias's eyes stayed on the battle in the sky. Arcs and black shapes locked in a dance of light and shadow. "If we leave, we may never see them again. If we stay, we might not live to." The observatory trembled as a shockwave rolled in from offshore. Above, the alien arcs formed a luminous barrier, holding back the black tide for one last moment. Elias took a step back from the balcony. "Then we run toward the edge." Epilogue, The Last Light. They evacuated inland under a burning sky. The curtain was collapsing, folding in on itself like torn fabric, taking with it the arcs, the black fleet, and the war neither side had time to finish. For weeks afterward, the night was strangely empty. No lights offshore, no distant hum in Elias's mind. The fleet declared the threat neutralized, but Elias knew better. Somewhere, beyond the stars he recognized, the arcs in the darkness were still locked in their endless struggle. And one day, the dark would find Earth again. Until then, humanity would prepare. Because now, they knew they were not alone.